In medieval France, animals could be formally tried and executed for crimes, with the most famous case occurring in Falaise in 1386. A sow was charged with the murder of an infant, accused of mauling the child to death in its cradle. The pig received a full legal trial, complete with defense attorney, witness testimony, and judicial proceedings that lasted several days. The court determined the sow was guilty beyond reasonable doubt and sentenced it to death by public hanging. On execution day, the pig was dressed in human clothing, including a waistcoat, gloves, and a human mask to emphasize its crime against humanity. Hundreds of townspeople gathered in the square to witness the unusual execution, treating it as seriously as any human hanging. The pig's own piglets were brought to trial as potential accomplices, but were acquitted due to lack of evidence of bad character in their youth. This case reflected medieval beliefs about animal culpability and the need for formal justice even when dealing with livestock, demonstrating how legal systems extended moral responsibility to creatures incapable of understanding human law. During World War II, behaviorist B.F. Skinner developed one of military history's most bizarre weapon systems, pigeon-guided missiles. The project involved training pigeons to peck at images of enemy targets, with their pecking controlling the missile's flight path through a sophisticated mechanical system. Skinner housed pigeons in the nose cone of bombs, where they would view the approaching target through a window and peck at it continuously. Their pecking activated pneumatic controls that adjusted the missile's fins, keeping it on target until impact. The system proved remarkably accurate in tests, with pigeons successfully guiding missiles to targets with precision that exceeded existing technology. However, military officials found the concept too absurd to implement despite its effectiveness. The idea of depending on birds to deliver nuclear weapons seemed preposterous to conventional military thinking. Skinner's pigeons were condemned to die upon impact, making them unwitting suicide bombers. The project was eventually canceled, not due to technical failure, but because military leadership couldn't accept the psychological reality of warfare conducted by expendable birds. In 1897, one of American legal history's most unusual murder cases relied on testimony from a ghost. Zona Heastershoe died under suspicious circumstances, but her husband Erasmus claimed she died from natural causes. However, Zona's mother, Mary Jane Heaster, claimed her deceased daughter's spirit visited her multiple times to reveal the truth about her death. According to the mother's testimony, Zona's ghost appeared wearing the dress she was buried in, but with her head twisted unnaturally, indicating her neck had been broken. The spirit allegedly demonstrated how Erasmus had grabbed her head and snapped her neck during a violent argument. This spectral testimony convinced authorities to exhume Zona's body for examination, where they discovered clear evidence of strangulation and a broken neck. The coroner found her windpipe crushed and vertebrae displaced, exactly as the ghost had indicated, based partly on this supernatural evidence. Erasmus Shue was convicted of murder, making it the only known case where ghost testimony contributed to a legal conviction. Before 1832, medical schools desperate for cadavers employed resurrectionists, professional grave robbers who supplied fresh corpses for dissection. These ghouls worked in organized gangs, using specialized tools to efficiently extract bodies from graves within hours of burial. They developed techniques to avoid detection, including tunneling to coffins from the foot end and using wooden tools that wouldn't damage valuable corpses. The most skilled resurrectionists could empty a grave and restore it to normal appearance in under an hour. The trade became so profitable that some criminals escalated to murder, with the infamous Burke and Hare case involving 16 murders to supply Edinburgh's medical school. Public horror reached its peak when families began discovering empty coffins and mutilated graves of their loved ones. The resurrection men showed no respect for age, gender, or social status, stealing everyone from infants to elderly aristocrats. This macabre industry finally ended with the Anatomy Act of 1832, which provided legal sources of cadavers for medical education. In 1859, the death of a single pig nearly triggered a full-scale war between the United States and Great Britain over the disputed San Juan Islands. An American farmer named Lyman Cutler shot a British-owned pig that was rooting through his potato garden, setting off an absurd chain of escalating military responses. British authorities demanded Cutler's arrest and deportation, while American settlers refused to surrender him. Both nations began mobilizing forces, with the British dispatching 3 warships carrying 2,140 men and 84 cannons, while Americans sent 461 troops with howitzers to the island. For several tense months, the two most powerful military forces in the world faced each other over a pig, with both sides under orders not to fire first but to respond aggressively to any attack. The standoff included dramatic moments where officers had to physically restrain trigger-happy soldiers eager for combat. Eventually, cooler heads prevailed, and the dispute was settled through arbitration 12 years later, making the pig the conflict's sole casualty. During the Civil War's Battle of Shiloh in 1862, wounded soldiers reported a mysterious phenomenon that seemed to herald life or death. Some battlefield wounds began glowing with an eerie blue-green light during the cold, rainy nights following the battle. Soldiers noticed that men with glowing wounds had significantly better survival rates and experienced less infection than those without the luminescence. This supernatural-seeming occurrence was dubbed Angel's Glow, as soldiers believed divine intervention was marking those destined to survive. Medical knowledge of the era couldn't explain why certain wounds would emit light or heal better. Modern research revealed the glow came from Photohabdus luminescens, a bioluminescent bacterium that thrives in cool, moist conditions and produces natural antibiotics. The bacteria likely infected wounds from the muddy battlefield, and its antibiotic properties actually improved healing outcomes. The phenomenon required specific temperature and moisture conditions that aligned perfectly with the battle's aftermath, creating what appeared to soldiers as miraculous divine intervention, but was actually beneficial bacterial infection. Cave Creek, Arizona maintains one of the American West's most unusual legal documents, an alleged deed to a human soul acquired through gambling. According to local legend, in the 1880s, a desperate gambler named David Talacht found himself deep in debt during a high-stakes poker game. Having lost everything including his horse, gun, and clothes, Talacht made the ultimate wager by putting up his immortal soul as collateral. When he lost the final hand, the winner supposedly drew up a formal contract, transferring ownership of Talacht's soul to the town. The deed, written on weathered parchment, includes specific terms about soul possession and is signed with what appears to be blood. Local historians debate its authenticity, but the document remains framed in the town's historical museum as a curiosity. Some residents joke about the town's supernatural real estate, while others worry about the implications of collectively owning someone's eternal damnation. The legend reflects the Wild West's reputation for extreme gambling, where men would risk literally everything. On November 22, 1987, television viewers in Chicago witnessed one of the most unsettling acts of broadcast terrorism in history. During a Doctor Who episode on WGN-TV, the signal was hijacked by someone wearing a grotesque Max Headroom mask and sunglasses. For 90 seconds, the intruder performed a disturbing, nonsensical monologue while swaying hypnotically against a corrugated metal background. The audio was deliberately distorted and difficult to understand, creating an otherworldly, threatening atmosphere. The hijacker made bizarre references to New Coke, hummed theme songs, and made cryptic statements that seemed designed to unnerve viewers. Most disturbing was the incident's conclusion, where the masked figure bent over and was spanked with a fly swatter while moaning, creating an intensely uncomfortable and surreal scene. Despite extensive FBI investigation involving signal triangulation and broadcast equipment analysis, the perpetrator was never identified. The incident demonstrated how vulnerable television broadcasts were to determined hackers and created lasting anxiety about media security and the power of anonymous technological terrorism. In 1931, the Irving family on the Isle of Man claimed their farmhouse was inhabited by a talking mongoose named Geff, who possessed disturbing supernatural abilities. The creature allegedly spoke in multiple languages, spied on neighbors through walls, and reported private conversations back to the family with malicious accuracy. Geff claimed to be an extra clever mongoose born in New Delhi in 1852, making him nearly 80 years old. The entity would throw objects, make scratching sounds in walls, and leave dead rabbits as gifts for the family. Most unsettling were Geff's reported threats of violence, telling visitors he could kill them all and describing in detail how he would murder people who annoyed him. Paranormal investigators found strange handprints and hair samples that couldn't be identified, but also discovered evidence suggesting elaborate hoaxing. The case divided experts between those believing it was genuine poltergeist activity and those convinced the family was perpetrating an incredibly sophisticated deception for unknown psychological reasons. Russian virtuoso Nicholas Rubinstein's final performance in 1888 became one of classical music's most tragic legends. During a concert, Rubinstein reportedly began slashing his wrist with a razor while continuing to play, his blood splattering across the keys as the audience watched in horror. Witnesses described the haunting contrast between his beautiful music and the increasing pools of blood forming beneath the piano. Despite severe blood loss causing weakness and dizziness, he refused to stop playing. Driven by either madness or artistic obsession, the performance continued for nearly 20 minutes as blood loss gradually affected his coordination, causing his playing to become erratic and dissonant. He finally collapsed across the keyboard, creating a jarring final chord as his body weight struck multiple keys simultaneously. He lingered for several days in delirium before dying from blood loss and shock. Some historians question whether this account is factual or an embellished legend, but the story captured the public imagination as the ultimate artistic sacrifice. Tolomonstrum gregarium, discovered in Illinois coal deposits, represents paleontology's most baffling creature from 300 million years ago. This bizarre organism possessed anatomical features so contradictory that scientists cannot determine what kind of animal it was or where it fits in the evolutionary tree. The creature had a soft, segmented body like a worm, but with a rigid internal structure. Two prominent eyes extended from its head on long stalks, giving it an alien appearance unlike any known life form. Most disturbing was its feeding apparatus, a long, flexible proboscis tipped with a claw-like mouth filled with rows of teeth, suggesting it was a predator despite its peculiar body plan. Thousands of fossils have been found, but none provide clues about its classification. The creature's anatomy combines features from different animal kingdoms in ways that should be impossible, making it appear more like something from science fiction than Earth's natural history. Its very existence challenges fundamental understanding of evolutionary biology. In 2010, the Dutch cargo vessel Marianne Vos was discovered drifting unmanned off Australia's coast in conditions that defied logical explanation. The engines were still running normally, indicating the abandonment was sudden and unplanned. A hot meal remained on the galley table, with food still warm, suggesting the crew had vanished just hours before discovery. All personal belongings, including wallets, phones, and family photographs, remained undisturbed in crew quarters. The ship's lifeboats were still secured in their davits, meaning the crew hadn't used standard emergency evacuation procedures. Most chilling was the final logbook entry, written in shaking handwriting. Strange noises outside. Investigate. No subsequent entries explained what the crew found or why they disappeared. Despite extensive air and sea searches covering thousands of square miles, no trace of the 7 missing crew members was ever found. The ship's cargo was intact and the vessel showed no signs of piracy, mutiny, or mechanical failure. The Yokosuka MXY-7 Oka represented the ultimate evolution of kamikaze warfare, a rocket-powered, human-guided missile designed for guaranteed destruction. Pilots would be carried beneath bombers until near their targets, then released to glide toward enemy ships, before igniting 3 solid fuel rockets for the final, unstoppable dive. The weapon's most terrifying feature was its aerodynamic design that created a distinctive, piercing whistle as air rushed through its wings during the death plunge. Allied sailors reported this bone-chilling scream could be heard from miles away, creating paralyzing fear as they realized an Oka was approaching. The psychological warfare aspect was intentional. The sound announced impending doom, while being impossible to defend against once heard. Pilots had no escape mechanism and were essentially flying coffins, making their sacrifice absolute. Allied forces nicknamed it the Baka Bomb, idiot bomb, but respected its effectiveness as the ultimate suicide weapon. On Christmas Day 1950, 4 Scottish nationalist students committed one of Britain's most audacious heists by stealing the Stone of Scone from Westminster Abbey. This ancient sandstone block, used in British coronations for centuries, symbolized English dominance over Scotland. During their nighttime break-in, the conspirators accidentally dropped the 336-pound stone while removing it from beneath the coronation chair, splitting it into 2 pieces. Panic-stricken, they wrapped both fragments in coats and smuggled them across the English-Scottish border in separate cars. The broken stone was secretly taken to a Glasgow stonemason who carefully repaired the fracture, matching the stone's texture and color so perfectly that the repair was virtually invisible. For months, British authorities searched frantically for the missing relic while it sat hidden in Scotland. The students eventually returned it anonymously, placing the repaired stone on the altar of Arbroath Abbey, where it was recovered by police. The Joyita mystery remains one of the Pacific's most chilling maritime disasters. In October 1955, this passenger vessel departed Samoa for the Tokelau Islands with 25 passengers and crew aboard. 5 weeks later, it was discovered partially submerged and drifting aimlessly in the vast Pacific. The ship's pumps had been deliberately disabled, and it was taking on water through unexplained holes in its hull. All 25 souls had vanished without trace, but their fate remained a puzzle. A doctor's medical bag was found on deck containing bloody bandages, suggesting someone had been treating severe injuries before the abandonment. The cargo holds were partially flooded, and the logbook's final entry mentioned strange noises outside before abruptly stopping. No distress signal was ever sent, no lifeboats were deployed, and no bodies or wreckage from the missing passengers were ever recovered despite extensive searches across thousands of square miles of ocean. The Hope Diamond's bloody history spans centuries of mysterious deaths and misfortunes befalling its owners. Originally stolen from the eye of a Hindu idol, it allegedly carries a curse that brings violent death to those who possess it. French merchant Jean-Baptiste Tavernier, who first acquired it, was supposedly torn apart by wild dogs. King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette were beheaded after owning it. Lord Hope, who gave the diamond its name, died bankrupt. Later owners suffered bankruptcies, suicides, and fatal accidents. May Yohei, an actress who owned it briefly, claimed it brought her nothing but heartbreak and financial ruin. While skeptics attribute these events to coincidence, the pattern of tragedy surrounding this 45.52-carat blue diamond spans over 300 years. The curse allegedly stems from Hindu beliefs about divine retribution for stealing sacred objects, making each subsequent owner pay for the original sacrilege. Mary Reeser's death in 1951 created one of the most disturbing mysteries in forensic science. Investigators found her 170-pound body reduced to just 10 pounds of ash and bone fragments, with only her left foot remaining intact in a slipper. Her apartment showed minimal fire damage despite the intense heat required to cremate a human body, which normally exceeds 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. The chair she'd been sitting in was mostly destroyed, but newspapers just feet away remained unburned. Police initially suspected murder, but the scene defied explanation. Scientists later determined the wick effect was responsible. Her body fat acted as fuel, with her clothing serving as a wick, creating a slow, intense burn that consumed her tissue while leaving surroundings relatively untouched. This required her body to burn for several hours at temperatures hot enough to calcify bones, essentially turning her into a human candle that slowly consumed itself. During 19th-century tuberculosis outbreaks, desperate New England families resorted to horrific post-mortem rituals based on vampire folklore. When family members died of consumption and others continued falling ill, survivors often blamed the deceased for returning to drain life from the living. They would exhume bodies months or years after burial, frequently finding corpses in various stages of decomposition. Bodies that appeared fresh or had shifted position due to natural decomposition processes were declared vampires. The most infamous case involved Mercy Brown in 1892, whose heart and liver were burned after exhumation, with the ashes mixed into medicine for her dying brother. Families would drive stakes through hearts, decapitate corpses, or burn entire bodies to stop the supposed vampiric drain. These gruesome rituals reflected the absolute desperation of communities watching tuberculosis systematically destroy entire bloodlines with no medical understanding of contagion. The 1813 Battle of Yerbas Buenas during Chile's War of Independence created one of history's most tragic demographic disasters. Spanish royalist forces slaughtered nearly every adult male from this small Chilean town, leaving behind a community almost entirely populated by widows and orphans. The battle's aftermath was particularly brutal as wounded men were systematically executed rather than taken prisoner. Within 24 hours, the town's population structure was permanently destroyed. Widows ranged from teenagers who'd been married mere weeks to elderly women who'd lost husbands of decades. Many had also lost their adult sons in the same battle, creating a generation of women who'd experienced multiple devastating losses simultaneously. The town struggled to survive economically and socially, as traditional male roles in agriculture and protection vanished overnight. This demographic catastrophe lasted for generations, as many widows never remarried and the community struggled to rebuild its male population. A rat king represents one of nature's most disturbing phenomena, multiple rats whose tails have become permanently knotted together, forcing them to move and feed as a single writhing mass. The largest recorded specimen was discovered in 1828 in Altenburg, Germany, consisting of 32 adult rats bound together in an inescapable tangle of flesh and fur. These creatures typically form when young rats sleeping together in confined spaces get their tails twisted and frozen by blood, ice, or feces, creating a permanent bond. The rats at the center usually die first from starvation and stress, while those on the outside struggle desperately to drag their dead companions while searching for food. Medieval Europeans considered rat kings harbingers of plague and famine. The psychological horror of watching these creatures move as one suffering entity, with some alive and some decomposing, made them symbols of impending doom. After drug kingpin Pablo Escobar's death in 1993, his private zoo was largely abandoned, but 4 hippos escaped into Colombia's Magdalena River basin. These African giants found the tropical climate perfect for breeding, and with no natural predators, their population exploded to over 130 individuals by 2023. Each adult hippo weighs up to 4,000 pounds and possesses bone-crushing jaws that can snap a human in half. They've become Colombia's most dangerous invasive species, attacking fishermen, destroying crops, and contaminating waterways with massive amounts of waste. Their aggressive territorial nature has led to numerous human fatalities. The Colombian government now considers them a national emergency, as they're projected to reach 1,000 individuals by 2035, potentially making entire river regions uninhabitable for local communities who depend on fishing for survival. Professional daredevil Todd Shriver attempted an impossibly dangerous world record in 1991, diving from 130 feet into just 18 inches of water in a children's wading pool. The stunt required perfect precision and body control to enter the shallow water at the exact angle needed to avoid fatal injury. Thousands gathered to witness what many considered a suicide attempt disguised as entertainment. As Shriver plummeted toward the tiny pool, he miscalculated his entry angle by mere inches. His head struck the pool's bottom with devastating force, instantly crushing his cervical vertebrae and severing his spinal cord. He survived the initial impact but was permanently paralyzed from the neck down. After years of suffering from complications including infections and organ failure, he died from his injuries, making this stunt both a failed record attempt and delayed execution. When a massive 45-foot sperm whale washed ashore in Florence, Oregon in 1970, city officials faced an unprecedented disposal problem. The 8-ton carcass was rapidly decomposing and attracting swarms of scavengers. In a catastrophically misguided decision, they decided to blow it up using half a ton of dynamite, believing the explosion would disintegrate the whale into small pieces for scavengers to consume. Instead, the blast launched house-sized chunks of putrid blubber over a quarter-mile in every direction. Spectators fled as massive pieces of rotting whale flesh rained from the sky, with one enormous chunk completely crushing a nearby car. The explosion barely reduced the original carcass, leaving officials to clean up both the original whale and the scattered remains across the beach and town. In 1994, Gloria Ramirez's death at Riverside General Hospital became one of medicine's most disturbing mysteries. When emergency staff treated her, they noticed a fruity, garlic-like odor emanating from her body. During attempts to draw blood, the syringe contained strange, oily particles with an ammonia scent. Multiple staff members suddenly collapsed, experiencing breathing difficulties, muscle spasms, and loss of consciousness. The hospital evacuated the emergency room, treating it like a hazmat situation. Scientists later theorized that her cancer treatment medications, combined with oxygen administered during resuscitation, created a deadly chemical reaction. Her body allegedly transformed dimethyl sulfoxide into dimethyl sulfate, an extremely toxic compound that poisoned the air around her corpse, making her literally lethal to approach.